Welcome everyone to the Builders AI Forum webinar. The name of this webinar is Should AI Have a Place in My Faith Journey? BAFE, the Builders AI Forum community, is dedicated to building and scaling of AI in order to support the mission of the church. My name is Edmundo Reyes. I'm very honored to be part of this community and also very honored to serve today as your webinar host. I want to welcome our panelists. Thank you so much for making time to be with us and for sharing your vision about AI and your experience about AI with us. I want to start by introducing Sean Graber. He is the president of EWTN Digital, where he's leading a large-scale digital transformation, including marketing EWTN to a new generation of viewers. He oversees product, engineering, and data analytics to build EWTN's next generation of streaming, web, and app experience. Welcome, Sean.
Great to be here.
I also want to welcome Drago Drimitov. He's the co-founder and CEO of Holy Habits, a spiritual coaching and habit tracking app to devout Catholics who want to know and walk their next steps to sainthood. By combining technology and tradition, Holy Habits empowers users to grow in holiness with personalized habit suggestions rooted in Catholic teaching. Welcome, Drago.
Thanks, Edmundo. Great to be with you all.
And finally, I want to welcome Father Stephen Wang. It's an honor to have you here, Father. Father Stephen is a Catholic priest from the Diocese of Westminster, and he's currently rector of the Venerable English College in Rome, one of the 5 seminaries serving the Catholic Church in England and Wales. Welcome, Father.
Thanks, Edmundo. Great to be here.
And since your priestly ordination, Father, since in 1998, you've worked in pastoral ministry in various settings in London, in parishes, schools, and hospitals and prisons. Thank you so much for all that you have done to serve the Church.
Thank you.
So we have a great topic today, one that I'm really looking forward to diving into with you. I want to start us off with a quote from the Holy Father, from Pope Leo, from last week regarding AI. As you may know, most of us have been hearing the Holy Father speaking on this topic. I love these last words that he shared with us at this meeting that he had with a pontifical group. Organization. He said, our dignity lies in our ability to reflect, choose freely, love unconditionally, and enter into authentic relationships with others. And he also said that artificial intelligence has certainly opened up new horizons for creativity, but it also raises serious concerns about what is possible, about its possible repercussions on humanity's openness to truth and beauty and capacity for wonder and contemplation. I thought that quote would help us get us started with this topic on how can AI genuinely support pastoral and personal spiritual growth in our lives, and if we've seen that already happening. So I want to start us off maybe with you, Father, just talking about in what ways do you believe that AI tools can help Catholics pray, reflect, and grow in virtue?
Yeah, well, Edmundo, it's interesting you threw in that word there, tools. I think that's a great starting point. And we've all experienced, probably in small ways, how AI can be a tool that's helping us in things that we're already doing. So it's helping us to access Catholic teaching through something like Magisterium AI or just using ChatGPT. It's helping us use apps that are maybe better customized to feed us spiritually and connect us with the tradition of the Church and the saints. It's helping parishes organize themselves better, just as it's helping many non-religious organizations. It's helping priests research and prepare homilies and prepare talks and maybe customize and improve the teaching and the ministry that we're doing in different ways. And this is all under the heading of tool. And I think that's where we are at the moment. But what I find interesting and really challenging is there's probably so much more that AI is going to do, which is beyond the level of tool. Tool makes us think we know what we're doing, we're in control, it can help us to do these things a little bit better, and that's fine. But I just wonder how far the horizon will stretch. Will AI become not just a tool, but a teacher, but a colleague? We speak about agentic AI and AI taking responsibility, and how will it challenge the way that we look at church and ministry? And we'll come on to these issues later, but just there's some starting thoughts.
Thank you so much, Father. And I encourage everyone to jump in and comment if you wish to. I'm going to serve some questions to you, but feel free to debate and support each other's comments. Drago, in what practical ways you see parishes at diocesan level, but also a personal level, where technology is deepening spiritual life rather than distracting it?
Yeah, well, even if I could zoom out for a second with the title of this webinar of should AI have a role in my faith journey? And well, yeah, when I hear that should, right, should. So I think about a son asking his father, should I watch that movie? And then the father says, well, there's some scenes that are not good for you in the movie. You shouldn't watch those scenes. Maybe you can fast forward and skip those bits. However, for the rest of it, if you can approach it in good contemplation and understand the true meaning of the movie, this movie could change your life. And so similarly with AI, on one end of the spectrum, people might say, well, stay away from it. Don't use it. You shouldn't use it. And then we say, well, no, like it's okay to use AI if you understand what you're doing and how to approach it appropriately. But then even aspirationally, what we're doing here with the Builder Forum is maybe, the tool can actually accelerate your path towards virtue, towards knowledge of the truth, increasing your fervor of devotion, such that the should could almost be a prescription of, hey, this is a tool that will help you out and maybe you should use it. And so, I mean, that's a hard argument to make, but that's kind of where it gets more interesting. But yeah, to answer your question, I think, well, even as you quoted the Holy Father, another way to phrase it is, we are meant to become perfected in the truth, for our intellect to know the truth, and then for our will to be formed in love. And, by loving God and loving others, we pursue those paths. So can AI help in those two dimensions? Certainly in the pursuit of truth. AI is phenomenal. There's a way to make contact and synthesize cross-disciplinary insights, to peel back the treasures of the church that have been around for 2,000 years, but now can be deployed in new contexts. That's certainly the case. And could AI be used to strengthen your will for devotion? That's where it gets interesting. And we try to make contact with that on a personal level by encouraging contemplation and prompting to the extent that people allow aspects of their life to be fed into kind of prompting and journaling and et cetera, that can really encourage that devotion. So I suppose, yeah, it can be a tool to help free you from other distractions, but improperly used, it could be a great distraction in of itself.
Thank you so much, Drago. Sean, just continuing with this topic and this line that we're embarking here, there are ethical implications or ethical limits that should guide AI and across the board. But when we're talking about formation and spiritual growth, what are your thoughts on where the church and us as Christians should draw the line or must draw the line?
Well, I think that's really the crux of the matter. When you think about AI, it's in some sense you could describe AI as a really a general purpose kind of tool. It enables you with really no sort of technical background to do a lot of different types of things that were really, many of which were almost impossible up until very recently. And so there are some ways in which you could use AI that are more prosaic that you could have done before. The idea of information retrieval kind of comes to mind. So I could use AI to do research and find documents about, topics that I might be interested, to Drago's earlier point, to synthesize those, to summarize those. And that's a use of AI, but it's not necessarily using, some of the more novel aspects, like the generative aspects. And so I think that's where, when you get into this, these sort of newer capabilities, I think that's where, frankly, a lot of the excitement lies. The ability to have these very open-ended conversations, can be really interesting. I use this in my work all the time to brainstorm strategies and, go back and forth on different ideas, ask AI to challenge my perspective, offer an opposing viewpoint. And so in that context, it's extraordinarily valuable. But if you take the really generative properties of AI and apply those in a faith context, it could be really beneficial. Actually lead someone into sin, into a misunderstanding, And it goes back, I think, to, what we've seen the Holy Father and documents coming out of the Vatican point to, and that is really the difference between, who we are as human persons and what AI can do. AI can mimic a lot of the intelligence that we have, but it's not a relational being. It's not a being in any sense that we would sort of define that word. At least I would contend. And so, some of those sort of things that you want to do, the conversations you want to have with other people who have feelings and an embodied experience, those can be replicated with AI, but at a certain point, I think it becomes really dangerous to ascribe to AI some of those same human qualities. And so I think we need to be really careful. It's almost like, to reframe almost the question, I think AI absolutely has a role in people's faith journey. To go back to the question that we posed sort of as the central premise of this webinar, AI absolutely can have a place in the faith journey. It's how we use AI. And sort of what roles we ascribe to it, I think that requires a lot of prudence. And I don't know that any of us have the answer of this. I think, to echo Father Stephen, I think we're using AI as a tool now, and there's lots of ways in which that's extremely beneficial. But, where can we go from here is a really interesting question. But I think that requires quite a bit of prudence to, ensure that we're not using AI in a way that, could be, more detrimental than beneficial.
Could I pose a question to the group on that point? Of course, with Antiqua at Nova over a year ago, the main concern was anthropomorphizing AI. And I've been struggling to find the right language because, and Father Stephen, to your point, you mentioned there's tool. That's easy enough to understand. But then this, we're talking about something that feels more like, as you said, an agent, a companion, and some dimension. And is it just... Are we going to have to accept that terminology, but give it the asterisk of like, we are analogously using it, just like when we speak of God, we are speaking in analogous terms. So yes, I'm going to call it a companion, an agent, an assistant, and all these things, but I'm not meaning there's no real conscious being, don't get confused. Or is there some language that would be more appropriate that still doesn't reduce it just a tool? Because again, that makes it sound like we're completely in control when we're not, but doesn't give it the ontological connotation of being something that is more than what it is.
Can I jump in, Edmundo?
Of course.
I think some of this we just don't know. It's just going to happen. We're going to end up using something, and then we'll put a language on it afterwards. I think we need to avoid being too clear sometimes. Just to take the example, friendship. We speak about AI companionship and AI friendship, and then sometimes a Catholic will jump in, or anyone, in fact, and say, no, it's not a real friend, because a real friend needs to be interpersonal and have consciousness. And the Catholic philosopher, of course, will jump in and say, quite rightly, I think, no, the machine, the AI, the system doesn't have consciousness, and it's not an interpersonal relationship. But hang on, it might still be a kind of friendship. And we should be very nuanced about this, and maybe open to different forms of friendship. Aristotle spoke about all sorts of different forms of friendship over 2,000 years ago. A mutual friendship, but there might be a friendship of pleasure. There might be a friendship of mutual needs. You can be friends with your dog or your cat, I think, at a certain level. Of course, it's not the same as being friends with a human, which we definitely want. But just to be nuanced and open about the fact that some of the words we use now, they might expand to include AI, but that doesn't mean we're investing AI with personhood, although there is the risk that we go too far and start anthropomorphizing in a way that will become unhealthy. But there's so much in the middle ground that we don't know yet. And unfortunately, or I don't know if that's the right word, we'll only find out by experimenting. And just the risk of that, to give a very contemporary example, is the fact that just this week, we know that Australia has brought in these new laws about outlawing social media for under 16-year-olds. So there's been a social media experiment for the last 15 years, and now society, at least in Australia, is pulling back from that very consciously. Will that be inevitable with AI, that we go so far and only by learning about what's working and not working do we end up pulling back? Lots of questions.
Well, I'd jump in really quickly, Drago. I think it's an absolutely fascinating question that you've posed. I don't know that I have the answer, but I do think, I think the broader point that you're looking to address is it might be in some point that sort of the linguistic elements of this, but I think it's also, language forms and is formed. Probably there's this sort of bi-directional relationship there. Forms our thoughts and is formed by our thoughts. And so if we address these AI systems in a way that we would address a human being, do we run the risk, I think, of falling for them being human companions? And unfortunately, there have been, a number of recent instances in which young people in particular in their lives, as a result of, getting into some sort of relationship with these AI agents that resulted in, really, really serious emotional turmoil and ultimately the loss of lives. And so, regardless of the manner in which we address them, and I agree that, that's maybe a bit of a gateway for certain individuals to start thinking of these agents as if they were human. I think the broader point that is absolutely true is that we do, and maybe Father Stephen, you would just sort of qualify this, which would be interesting, but I do think we need to ensure that we keep the distinction very clear, because these are sort of different types of things, and maybe that does, require or necessitate a different sort of language, different definition of relationship. There's certain classes of these things that we've known before. That's certainly a possibility. But I think these, early cases of these tragedies are cautionary tales for what can happen if we don't take some sort of safeguard, or at least talk about the risks, particularly with folks who are younger and more impressionable, and are more susceptible to falling into these traps.
Yeah, and so right now, for example, I'm interacting with Sean, Father Stephen, Edmundo. But when I interact with AI, who or what am I interacting with? In my mind, if AI is in essence a collective representation of the wisdom of humanity in some capacity, I'm interacting with that. I'm interacting with somehow some aggregate of humanity as filtered by my own interests and attention, since in my inputs. So it's like my inputs are a filter onto the collective humanity. So in that sense, is there a friendship I'm having with humanity as an abstract when I engage in discussions with AI? And is that right? There's friendship with the dog, friendships with humans, and then is there friendship with like nature? Can I be friends with this spot near the mountain and the river and the creek? And then AI, some kind of philosophical friendship with the mind of the collective mind of humanity. I don't know, but sorry, not to make it overly philosophical, but it's just what you're provoking in me as I hear those words.
I love these beautiful reflections, and I want to go back to two things that have been mentioned. One, Father, you started making a distinction between AI as a tool and then what could happen in the future. So I would love to touch base about that just in a minute. But before we go there, building on what you were saying, Drago, we believe here in the BAIF community that the church has tremendous wisdom to share with the world about how to navigate these AI age. So I would like for the three of you to share what is this wisdom. What can we offer that can help people evaluate what AI should do in their spiritual journey? So for someone that is watching this webinar, for someone that is a community leader, a parish diocesan leader, but also an individual, what does the church offer us that can help us evaluate AI as a tool for our spiritual growth and deepening of our spiritual life?
Shall I jump in, Edmundo, just in the silence?
Yes, Father, go ahead.
I think one of the key questions whenever we're using anything, so this is not just to do with AI, not just to do with AI as a tool, but from a Catholic Christian perspective, is what's the goal? What's the purpose? And we have to keep that in mind and maybe not make too many rules too early, because the rules will probably change or we'll be in a different world in a year's time. So just to take one way of answering that, it's not the only way as a Catholic Christian, but for example, one way of describing the mission of Jesus Christ is that Jesus Christ came obviously to save us, but to be priest, prophet, and king. Priest, prophet, and king. And that the church shares in that threefold mission by being a church that wants to lead us in holiness and worship, priest, to lead us into truth through good teaching and preaching, that's prophecy, and to guide us into a living, loving community within the church and open to all and open to those around us. That's Jesus Christ as the king, as the shepherd, as the governor. And so whenever we think about AI, whether it's the most basic tool level, how can AI help me today, or in months and years' time, how is agent AI, managerial AI, colleague AI going to be part of my living as a Christian and perhaps as a Christian leader? That's the question. Is it helping to fulfill the mission of teaching, of sanctifying and governing? And I had this conversation with Sean the other day when we happened to bump into each other. For me, that's the measure and the answer. If AI is helping us to teach and to learn better, then it's a good thing. Whether I call it a friend or not, whether I think it has consciousness or not, those deep philosophical questions, they're really interesting and important. But the key question is it helping to teach and to learn? Is it helping us to be holy? Is it helping us to live in a Catholic Christian community in a loving, faithful way? So the goal is important. And then another way of looking at this is to say, what are some of the foundations of Catholic Christian life that we know won't change, even though there's so much unknown about AI and the future? And I think Catholics are in a really good position because we've got such solid foundations in our Christian life and our church teaching. For example, the 4 pillars of the Catechism. The 4 sections of the Catechism: the Christian faith based on the Creed, the church's worship and sacraments, the church's worship based on the 7 sacraments, the Christian moral life based on the 10 commandments and the Beatitudes, and the 4th part, prayer and spirituality, and our own love for the Lord and our own growth in holiness. These are foundational, and the fundamentals of these 4 parts of the Catechism aren't going to change wherever AI takes us. And it means we've got a point of reference. Is this tool, is what we're developing with our current AI strategy, is it helping us to rediscover the riches and to stay rooted in these foundations, or is it taking us away? And I think it will and it can, but that's the measure that we keep having to come back to. What's the goal of the Christian life and the church, and what's the foundations of the Christian life? And to keep coming back to those as points of reference.
I can add maybe not as comprehensive a reflection as Father Stephen. That was extremely insightful. But just one element I think that certainly the church teaches us that is extraordinarily relevant, to our lives is just the nature of humanity, in particular our fallenness, our sinfulness, and that reality, and the reality that the solution to that is repentance, is internal conversion and salvation through Jesus Christ. I think what we see, sort of more broadly in the tech world, is this sort of maximalist tech optimism that we can solve every possible inconvenience, and food will appear on your doorstep very quickly, and we will live forever because we'll solve disease. And I think we know that to be untrue. Human nature is not going to change as a result of our technical progress, and our technical progress is ultimately insufficient to address the question of our own interior conversion, our own salvation, even though it might be able to help. I think that is, one fundamental reality that the church offers us, that I think is often at odds with the way that, some sort of very, very technologically optimistic people kind of see the world, that there's always a technical solution to these things. And I think that's false in a lot of cases.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add. So even the other week, just to give an anecdote, how it can be helpful in the faith journey. I was struggling and thinking and contemplating the question of, well, what does it mean exactly that Christ loves me? right? Like, because we have all these answers, and I've had the answer, but I'm like, no, let me take a fresh thing. Like, what do I really think is happening here? How does Christ love me, and in a way that's different than like Christ loves humanity, and then I happen to be a singular instance of humanity, but no, specific to me, Drago, and the things that make Drago, myself, right? And so then it gets into like, well, yeah, there's Christ's human nature, and Christ loves you through his human nature in a way that's different than how Christ loves you through his divine nature. And so there's different dimensions, and there's a dynamic dialogue there that leverages like Aquinas and other things that, and it's more than just an intellectual insight, because then that affected my prayer life, and then I had in a prayer, more meaningful impact, conversations through the Spirit, right? That taken back to prayer, the insights I got through my own wrestling were beneficial. And I think that's not unlike how God can work through books or any other medium of information. And on that point, with when we look at a book, well, what's a book? If you have all of the possible ideas that humans could ever combine with, an author of a book kind of reaches from that, synthesizes, packages, and then here's a static representation of some subset of the ideas. And now with AI, rather than having a author writing publication, to get the package, you have a constant stream of like, instantaneous book iterations where, you're generating devotionals, you're generating perspective, all this stuff that functions in the same way a book can help you, AI can help you, but in a very accelerated, personalized fashion. But last thing I said, the caveat though, that I think is dangerous and we have to have an answer for, is using AI a lot could give you a sense of a pseudo omniscience. It could create almost like a deity, just like, Sean mentioned, people trying to live longer, there's this maximalist thing. Well, in some sense, we have a proxy for omniscience in our pockets. And, when we have our glasses, all these other technology interfaces, you're going to get the answer to whatever question you want. And so there is a Gnostic / self-sufficiency aspect we have to watch out for as well.
I would love to continue this conversation about practical uses of AI as a tool to support our prayer life. So I'm gonna pose a question with 3 directions you can take in how you answer it. So just in general, what are personal experiences are you seeing among Catholics who are using AI in their faith lives? So that's kind of like the general question that I have for the 3 of you. And options, I'm going to give you A, B, and C. A, you could talk about encouraging stories, perhaps of parishioners or friends or family or communities that are using AI and integrating it well in a healthy and fruitful way. So that would be kind of positive uses. B, if you want to take that path, would be what surprises you the most of how ordinary Catholics, or not ordinary Catholics, but lay people there are using and adopting AI for their prayer, for their spiritual life. And the third one is a bit of potential, is what unmet needs you're hearing from Catholics who are integrating AI in their faith journey, but they have these unmet needs. So 3 options, A, B, and C, but you can take D or all of the above. But personal experiences, positive, encouraging ways that you're seeing that AI is helping in people's lives, along the lines of what you were saying, Father, with a goal in mind of where we need to go.
Yeah, well, I'll say, even though I ended with a cautionary, foreboding thing, I mean, what we're doing with Holy Habits, of course, we use AI a ton, and we get people talking all the time how they're finally building these habits and practices. Why? Because we're able to take a person in their unique life situation, they're a father, they're a mother, they're in, finance industry, or they're stay at home, whatever it is. This is what they're anxious about. This is what they care about. This is their goal for their faith life. This is what they think God is telling them. And we are able to prescribe, leveraging the church teachings, like actionable steps on, hey, like if you want to become a saint, I mean, like this isn't just some fantasy story. We want to become saints. What's your next step to sainthood? And it sounds presumptuous, but I'm dead serious. That's the kind of goal that we're driving, and people responding very well to that. They're, overcoming vices that were, previously struggling with, being able to be gentler with family members, right? I mean, there's very specific things. So, I mean, look, it's no different, I suppose, than if you had a good coach, or, I mean, I don't want to say like a spiritual director, because again, there is the interpersonal component that AI can never replace, but the insight layer, I think, is tremendous. And certainly I think, if I may say, God will be the judge, but I think my own life, I've grown in virtue through some of these technology tools as well.
Well, I have young children, and so a lot of my friends are in a similar state of life with young children, and maybe this isn't the most sort of advanced use of AI, but I really am seeing a lot of folks use AI to help answer their children's questions. So children can have the most insightful questions that sometimes leave you, a little bit at a loss for words, whether it's just a question about, the readings at mass for a particular day, or, just other questions that they have as you sort of, educate them and catechize them and form them in the faith. And I've just heard a lot of questions from, my wife's friends and some of my friends as well, where they're using AI to help, refresh their own understanding of the faith, which I think is a great use of AI, provided that you're using, safe tools or prompting AI in the right way, and then checking the answer to make sure that, you're not getting any sort of incorrect information. But that's a great use case. I mean, we have so much data at our fingertips with AI, and it's just tremendous. And so I've seen a lot of folks just really deepen their understanding of the faith through these tools that allow more open-ended exploration than I think has been previously available, but specifically as it relates to education. And so I think that's a tremendous use case. I mean, especially, in my early years personally, having been really under catechized and having had to sort of teach myself a lot of the faith later in my adult life, I think the ability to, is a potential tremendous boon, for young people, exploring the faith as they grow.
I love your answer, Sean, and really practical application and how AI can help us even adjust the answer. Maybe it, but like even just kind of like the right language and the right way to present something to an audience. So when you provide that context and kind of boundaries to AI, can help us with that. So it's beautiful that you guys are using it in that way to fulfill your role as educators of your children. Father Stephen, do you want to?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to share. Look, I'm going to cheat and go sideways a little bit, Edmundo.
And go ahead, Father.
We've asked for AI helping in ordinary Christian spiritual lives, and we've heard two wonderful answers. So just to go sideways with two anecdotes, because they're in my mind, about how friends and colleagues have used it in terms of Christian leadership and ministry. And they're both very recent. Only this afternoon, I was speaking to a lay friend in Sweden who's got a real passion and a gift for trying to use AI in the creation of media, of video and audio, for the service of the church. And he's got two things driving him. One is the fear that Catholics, this is part of our conversation now, are not being creative enough, are not really leaning in to how AI can be used for the gospel and for the mission of the church. And that we're tending to be slightly more afraid than excited, many people in the church. And his other motivation that's motivating him personally is just seeing the ways that AI is racing so quickly in media, in culture, in the non-Catholic world, and that we're really falling behind. So he's just spending a lot of time trying to learn about AI, media, new apps, things are changing all the time. And he just demoed to me this very afternoon some amazing projects he's been experimenting with about creating biblical stories in cartoon for Christian families in Sweden, doing projects showcasing the work of a monastery that he knows to make the monastery more accessible to visitors. So just here's someone very creative using AI to do things that visually would have been impossible within a small budget, but now are possible if only people are courageous and creative enough to lean into that. And also, he added, it's really hard funding this. So we need some Catholic funders and donors to support these wonderful entrepreneurs. Another example, again, of a Christian leader rather than an ordinary person like you and me saying our prayers, is an Australian priest friend in the Diocese of Melbourne, who showed me how he'd been using AI almost like an assistant, a companion, a colleague, to help him develop an evangelization strategy for his parishes. I think he's in 3 parishes together. But it was a very, very high level. It wasn't just write me a sermon tomorrow that will help my parishioners. He fed in lots of data about the demographics of his parish, the mass goers, the sociology. He said he fed in lots of data about different evangelists that had inspired him, that he'd like to model himself on. And then he said, put all this together, and what evangelization strategy would you suggest to me as a priest new to this parish? And the project, the plan was remarkable. I mean, really remarkable. This wasn't just a tool. This was a colleague. It was almost a strategic leader helping him to think through ways of evangelizing his parish, not just down to big picture ideas, but what's the next 7 steps he could take to implement this, to bring people on board, to trial it, to test it, to A/B test it, to launch it, to roll it out to other parishes in his local deanery. So again, it's just one example, one anecdote of how AI has the potential for good if it's used well. And as I said earlier on, if the goals are right, how to build God's kingdom, and if the Catholic foundations are there, which is we're not straying completely off track of what it means to be Catholic.
I love these anecdotes. I think they're perfect answers for the question that we had, and the purpose of this webinar, just to help us and guide us thinking about AI. How can we use it for our spiritual growth? I want to invite people who are watching the webinar to submit their questions. We'll have time to answer those questions. So I want to prep us with a closing question for this time, and then we'll jump into the audience's questions. So looking ahead, and this goes back to, Father, what you were saying at the very beginning, beyond tools and what we see in the horizon, or where we can dream of about what AI could do. So looking ahead, what is one hope and one caution you would offer the church and us as individuals in terms of AI becoming more integrated into our daily life and pastoral ministry? So one hope and one caution.
I'll jump in. I haven't planned this, so it's very spontaneous. I think one hope is a big picture hope. It's that the amazing power and innovation and creativity of AI will not just do what we want it to do for us as a tool, but will help us as a church, ordinary Christians and church leaders, to think about the life of the church and the call to holiness in new ways, which will surprise us and which will challenge us. We're often saying, be careful of the dangers of AI, as if everything is going really well in the church now. But in fact, in reality, so many things in the life of the church are difficult, or we don't have the answers, or we're making a mess of it, and we need help. And I don't mean we hand over responsibility and accountability to AI, that's a danger, but to have the humility to say AI, as it's developing, with all its biases and risks and everything, might be able to challenge and help us to live the Christian life and live the mission of the church in ways that we haven't even thought of now. And that takes a lot of humility. And I suppose the caution would be to make sure, as I've said already, that we're rooted in the life of the church that has come to us from Jesus Christ and from the tradition. The teaching of the church, the sacramental life of the church, and the communion and the community of the church. In other words, that we don't become just a virtual church. And I think it's such a gift for Catholics in particular that we have the 7 sacraments that we believe come from Jesus, and that they are all physical as well as spiritual. So wherever we go with virtual community and communion and friendships, we have to come back to, for example, the communion of the Mass, meeting our brothers and sisters, worshipping together, meeting the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, in the sacrifice of the Mass. So that's the caution. We can't become a virtual church. we're a church where AI will help us to be more the real communal, physical, human church that we are and that we always should and will be.
Well, I'd love to jump in, Father Stephen, and I have a similar caution. In fact, when we were meeting at this conference just a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, one of the participants shared this sort of vision for how AI in particular would impact content creation, and maybe this is a widely held view, but they were talking about a world in which we might not even be consuming content that other people create, but rather we are using AI to create precisely the content that we want to see ourselves. And I think it's the risk of this, hyper personalization. AI is almost like the most personalized tool that we've ever had in a lot of ways, because it knows about your conversations. It knows about you. It can really get to know you in ways that are really profound. And so there's a risk, I think, that we go all really inwards, and we retreat into this sort of digital world, even more so than we have today with social media, because it's not even social anymore. It's just it's sort of a media of our own creation. And that's the caution that we lose what Father Stephen was saying, that togetherness, that, incarnational aspect, that, real connections in real life. People say, go touch grass, right? I think that's the caution. The hope, I think there's so many people, and maybe this is born out of my own experience in some ways, kind of reading my way. Well, I had a conversion story, I suppose, another story for another time, but part of that reversion experience was a really intellectual reversion or conversion. And as Drago mentioned earlier, one of the really amazing things that generative AI can do is, synthesize arguments. It can be very logical. And I think that there's a really an amazing place for AI to potentially play to educate people more about the faith. And I talked about education of young children before, but really people of any age to grapple with, the truths of the faith. And assuming AI can be a faithful representation of what we do believe, I think there's the potential to win people's minds. Win people's minds over to the Catholic intellectual tradition, and then, ultimately kind of win them over to the faith in general. I think that could be a huge opportunity for AI to play in the church and really have a lot of impact in people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really great points you guys made. I'd say on that front, yeah, I mean, apologetics, evangelization, certainly a big opportunity there. I mean, I'll even go as far as to say that atheism has de facto been refuted by AI, because I think a lot of the modern atheism boils down to, semantics, and AI can kind of parse through that. But I think we're heading towards a time where we increasingly don't need each other as much, while simultaneously needing each other more than ever. It's this weird paradoxical thing. So yeah, there is this risk of being inward, because you can kind of get an approximation for all of your needs increasingly without the need of other people. But in reality, we need other people. That's the deepest aspects of life. But look, I think concretely, just to make it practical again, I think what I would do is, like, if you haven't done it already, use AI today and ask it to do an analysis on you. Say, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I've had many conversations. What can I improve on? Where do I rank? If there's a percentile distribution on all, on 20 factors, choose the 20 factors you think are most relevant and rank me on those percentiles. Like, you can get pretty granular and have some pretty good insights. That, and relationally, look, we all have relationships that aren't perfect in our lives right now. There's a difficult family member, there's a difficult colleague, there's a difficult whoever. You can use AI to help brainstorm, facilitate how to make peace. What's different language? I mean, traditionally, where you might have gone to assertiveness training or non-violent communication or whatever, right? All these different ways. And you're like, oh, I really like that language. AI can plug into your situation and really provide some therapeutic benefit that otherwise was unavailable. And lastly, I think that the change is happening so fast and so substantial that this entire system of society, I think, and no one can say what it's going to be, but I think we can mostly agree that it's going to be different. So the status quo of how people, go to school, get a job, have a 35-year career, this, that, capitalism in its current form, all these things, all these axioms that we just took for granted, I think are now on the table, and we might see a massive restructuring on certain first principles of how we collectively organize. And that could be an exciting thing. Obviously, it could go wrong as well. So just more like let's stay discerned and prepare to navigate those waters, and hopefully there'll be some good things on the other side.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Great answers. I want to transition to a question from the audience, and then I'm going to hopefully have time for more questions. But this one has a big intro, so here we go. In my own spiritual journey, AI has been genuinely transformative. It's helped me explore deep theological questions with a level of context and precision that comes from drawing on the church's vast intellectual and spiritual tradition. Used rightly, it's allowed me to understand teachings more clearly and to grow in faith, not replace it. So, a question for the panel. Many people we serve, whether through evangelization or general pastoral care, aren't using explicitly Catholic AI tools. They're encountering general models like ChatGPT. Or Gemini, often without formation or guidance. How do we help those individuals approach these tools in a way that keeps them grounded in their faith, especially when the models don't operate under a Catholic framework or persona? What does responsible formation looks like for that group?
I was going to jump in and talk about something very related to this just a moment ago, and I'll keep it really brief. But I think about AI. It's AI. I think about in my own world. I do lead sort of technical teams and teams of software engineers. I could go into an AI tool like Claude or even OpenAI and say, "Hey, build me an app," and it would write the code and build an app, set to certain specifications. But that activity is sort of outside the bounds of my knowledge. So my ability to wield that tool in that context is really limited. If I go in and say, "Hey, let's talk maybe more about product management, business strategy," the kinds of things that I've done for a long time, and feel like I have a good grasp of from a domain standpoint, both what I know and also the bounds of my knowledge, I'm going to be much more successful in that latter context because I have a better sense of whether the model is saying things that are smart or not smart, and I can really evaluate that. And so I think there is a fundamental formation that people need to be able to wield these tools effectively. That could be mediated by AI. You could need some sort of previous formation, but that formation does need to happen in a really sort of a faithful and a grounded way, so that then they can go deeper and sort of evaluate, the sort of like the sense in which what they're getting is true, and maybe understand where the model might be going off. But the other thing also is just maybe instructing them in really good prompting techniques, because all of the Catholic AI that's out there, those are running on frontier models from the large AI companies or AI products labs like from Google and Meta and the rest. And so what they're doing is putting sophisticated prompts and context and other things sort of around those foundational models. I think with a well-constructed prompt that instructs the AI to answer in an orthodox way and cite documents from the church and provide links to those documents on authoritative websites, I think you can put some controls around it so you can verify what the AI is telling you by having recourse to a site like the Vatican or a site like EWTN to throw in a quick plug there. And so I think maybe those are rules that apply to really any domain of knowledge that you're using with AI. But I think it'd be good advice for folks that are diving in.
I think this wonderful question, Edmundo, of formation. Yeah, formation for all of us, for ordinary Catholics like ourselves, but for formation for people coming in as well. I think I probably want to give two answers. On the one hand, for people who are out there in the digital world looking for AI tools, I want to help basically market and promote the great AI tools, Catholic AI tools that are there, and to encourage, as I was saying earlier with my videographer friend, to encourage more and more Catholics and creatives and entrepreneurs to develop good Catholic digital and AI tools, so that people are less dependent on the Google or the ChatGPT. I'm not saying they're bad, but just they've got Catholic resources that they can go to that are more reliable and that can help to form them. So on the one hand, I'd want to get more Catholic digital AI, great stuff out there, and to get it out to as many people. On the other hand, there's this interface where people who've been formed, they've been in AI or doing the prompts and growing and on just good old-fashioned YouTube, and they've been brought to the point where they want to make it a bit more real and they want to connect with the parish. And I think we need to be really ready as Catholic Christian communities to welcome people and to form them in a way that isn't just sending them back out to Catholic AI. So improving Catholic AI and bringing them from Catholic AI into a community that is the life of the church, where real human interpersonal bodily relationships can take place, and they can find friends and a supportive community life that's not just virtual and AI based. And that's, I'd say, the second part is the harder part, because lots of our Catholic communities are not ready to welcome what we hope could be an influx of people coming in as AI natives with all these questions, with all these, in one sense, very well formed intellectually, perhaps. They might know far more about Catholicism than we do, because they've been exploring online for months or years. But then where do they land? And that's not just an AI question. That's been true for 2,000 years, but it's more and more urgent now.
There is a question for you, Father, but I think all of you can answer it too, from perhaps a different perspective. It has to do with the spiritual direction. Spiritual direction is a great tool that the Church offers to us Catholics to grow and deepen our relationship with the Lord and to seek His will. Is there a room for AI to support spiritual direction? Is it okay? And what is the role of AI in spiritual direction?
Well, I definitely want to hear from Sean and Drago. Look, I'm a bit controversial here. My answer is I think it can, to some extent. And I think as soon as I say something like that, a lot of priests and lay people I know, they would recoil. They would say immediately, oh, yes, but spiritual direction is about the interpersonal. It's about Cardinal Newman, heart speaks to heart. It's about a relationship. And I just say that is one part of really good spiritual direction. And AI can't replace that. I'd never pretend that. But I'd go back to a theme that's come up a few times, is that some of these things that we think are very monolithic are actually very multiform and complex and interesting. Spiritual direction has got lots of facets to it. Part of spiritual direction is wanting practical answers to spiritual questions that we've got. And I think AI can do a lot of that. But even going further, part of spiritual direction is having someone who can listen well and understand and respond, not just to the intellectual questions we have, but to the personal questions that we have, and the emotions that we're expressing, and the spiritual questions and problems that we're facing. And again, someone would jump in and say, there's no way that AI can be a substitute for someone listening to you and understanding your emotions. Well, I'd simply say they're wrong, because AI, we know this from many examples, can be a good listener in many ways, and can be have a lot of emotional intelligence. Yeah, just an example, AI therapists in some areas are doing remarkable work, because in many ways human beings are not good listeners. We always say, oh, you need a human being because you need a real listener. Well, many of us are not very good listeners, just as many priests don't have a very clear understanding of the Catholic faith in their mind. So if AI can do some of what spiritual direction is doing, sympathetic listening, answering practical questions about the faith, about the spiritual life, really customizing answers, because AI can know you very well. I mean, leaving aside privacy issues, although they're really important, I think AI spiritual direction, in theory, as it develops, can do a lot, has got the potential to do a lot of good, even though, as I've said right at the beginning, it won't be a substitute for a loving human brother, father, friend, but it might do a lot, and it might do a lot more than we want to admit it can do straight away.
Yeah, no, great points, Father Stephen. I agree with what Father Stephen said, and we've been wrestling with that for a while. My co-founder started a spiritual director matchmaking service a few years ago, and that actually kind of led to Holy Habits. And so we've been wrestling with this balance a lot. And one way we talk about it is that there's a spectrum of accompaniment, right? So yes, at its ultimate, fruition, it's spiritual direction, deep interpersonal relationship that can't be replaced. But then, on the other end, you have people who are alone and they're reading books, right? We're reading Interior Castle, Imitation of Christ, private devotions, which is great. But there's this whole spectrum in the middle, right, of ramping up where you get some of that accompaniment, or even if you use a tool to augment in an existing spiritual director-directee relationship, that, in between sessions, there can be a lot of analytics, there could be a lot of insights provided that would give the director or the mentor or the coach insights as well, kind of like a co-pilot, like a spiritual director co-pilot in some sense. So those are certain things. And yeah, I mean, just to echo, right, there's the insight layer, and there's a natural layer, just like a therapist, there's pattern recognition. So there's patterns of my behavior, my thoughts. And so certainly a trained tool or a human who's good at it can recognize certain patterns. But then the supernatural dimension, of course, as Father Stephen, is indicating as well, is that part's different. AI cannot pray. AI cannot discern the will of the Holy Spirit directly. But the will of the Holy Spirit is imprinted in the pattern of the church and the will of God in the pattern of the saints. So to that extent, AI can infer, this sounds scandalous, in some sense can infer God's will in a generic sense, right? I want to be very careful here. But there is no direct, the Spirit. So a true spiritual director will guide you in your walk with God and help you discern the Holy Spirit. And yeah, there's, if you get into the frontier, as Father Stephen said, it can make people uncomfortable and nervous. But we do need to have those conversations and separate the wheat from the chaff, because there is real value and there are real dangers as well.
And just a quick extra thought, Edmundo. I've often heard people say, AI can't replace a good spiritual director. I agree, but almost statistically, no one has a spiritual director, meaning the vast majority of people in the parish can't access a spiritual director. So it's not about AI versus a good spiritual director. It's about AI versus zero. And if an AI can do 20% or 50% of what a good spiritual director is doing for someone who has never received any spiritual director, that will be a fantastic contribution to the spiritual life of the church.
You make a great point, Father. We are running against the clock here. Sean, I don't know if you have any final thoughts that you would like to share, and then after that, I'll wrap it up. But thank you so much for your generosity, sharing your thoughts and ideas with us and your knowledge and experience.
No, I think Drago and Father Stephen's thoughts are perfect to end on, Edmundo. So I'll just pass it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much. This is a great community, the BAIF community, dedicated to building and scaling AI in order to support the mission of the church. Tune in for future webinars. There's a lot planned for 2026, so it's an honor to have you listen to these webinars and to be part of it. And I want to thank you, Father, and Sean and Drago for being part of this community and sharing your experience with all of us. Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Thanks very much, Edmundo.
Thank you very much.